Hello everyone, my name is Ian McNaught and I'm the Strategic Organisational Development Manager in the Scotland Excel Academy. So this short video complements the previous Stay Connected online workshops, and it's part of a much wider portfolio of 41 different workshops on different topics that the Academy team has delivered. So the topic of this discussion is about how do we do more with less, and specifically by using innovative new ways of working. So we'll explore that in the next number of slides. Okay, so something that's often said in the Scottish public sector is we need to do more with less. And that can be contentious, it can be accepted, but let's try and think about, well, what does that actually mean? And if we can do that, how can we do it? So there's a piece of literature that says if people work hard, if they're skilled, and if they have the proper instruction, there's no way they can do more with less. If they're not working in that way, if they're not applying themselves as they might, if they have got some development needs to give them more ability, make them more skilled, and if they're not properly supported and led, then yes, there is scope for doing more with less. So there's a bit of interpretation there, there's a bit of reflection to think about that first of all. But if we're going to do more, it means we have to train and develop people better. We have to make people more productive, and we have to implement new ways of working. Now, some of the language there, it's not about we're forcing people or making people. This is not about exhausting people or unduly stressing them. We all have got a level of stress in our normal work and a normal work practice. So this is about supporting people, facilitating getting the best from people, figuring out how we can help each other, and how we can actually go forward together. But it still comes back to say that if we have to do more with less, we have to understand about our productivity, our abilities, our motivations, and the way we're supported, and do we get the opportunity to do what we need to do. So with that in mind, there's some things we might want to consider. Why are we doing the work we're doing? Can we say no? Can we say no because I need more time to finish what I'm working on, and these are the priorities we agreed? Might be easier to say that in a video than it is actually to do in practice with your boss, your leader, or the senior management team. But it's not trying to be confrontational. It's trying to have some realism that says we can change what we're working on, but we have to slow some things down or put some things on hold. It's about effective management, effective leadership, and project management methodology. It's not to say we can't be more productive, but there's maybe some things that need to happen to do that. There's any suggestion that we chunk up the work. In other words, we segment work into scopes of work and we group them together with similar tasks, meaning that once we've got our headspace in a way of working, applying certain skills, it's usually more productive if we do all that sort of stuff together at one time. And we should stop multitasking. Multitasking is only effective and productive for a very small number of people. For most people, multitasking just means we dilute our mental capacity over more things, which means they take longer to do, or we don't do them so well. So multitasking for most people really isn't a good approach. Within our work environment, teams, functions, departments, and our internal and external networks, it makes sense to use our relationships and to harness our experience and others' experience. In other words, how can we collaborate? How can I learn stuff from you that's better than how I currently do things? How can we do that, vice versa? Are there relationships which would help us gain support to some things or gain access to some things? It's about using that in quite a proactive, constructive way. And if we're going to do more, then we do need to get the best from people. People have different abilities, different motivations, different values, but how do we get the best out of each individual whilst working in a constructive, supportive environment? And what is our work environment like? What are the work conditions like? Is there a better way of doing what we do? Is there a better way of working? Whether that's remote, whether it's in the office, face-to-face, online, different systems. If I had that, I could be twice as productive. It's about exploring all of that, and we'll come on to that about how we might actually be able to progress some of that. We're all capable of leading if we're motivated and to act in that way. And if we're motivated to learn the stuff we need to be better at, but we can lead, we can influence, and we can empower. And there are people who have the formal titles and authority to do that, but there's a lot of informal leadership which can actually be very useful too. We should align tasks to strengths, and we should explore that a little bit. So if someone's good at doing certain things, we can give them those tasks and they'll get done the most productively in the best way they can be done. And that's got its place. Equally, if we're thinking about developing people, broadening people's expertise and giving them exposure to some things, if we're going to cross-train and widen people's expertise, then we're going to have to let people shadow each other, or we can't give all the tasks to the one individual. And if we think about succession planning and cross-training, it could have its limitations, although it could be quite productive. So we actually need a balance of that. If we're going to do more or less through innovative new ways of working, we definitely have to do things through new ways of working, ways that are better than we currently do them today. And if we're going to do that sort of stuff, we need to co-act. And we don't need to co-act, but it would be very helpful if we did. Now, there's a different workshop, which the sole topic is about co-action, so we'll not cover that in any great detail here, but how can we collaborate in a way that's more productive, more valuable than we currently work today? Can we co-create things, co-deliver, co-produce? Can we collaborate in a way that's might save resource, might save costs, might save money? So that's really what that's about, and it's definitely got its place. And then, do we exploit and do we explore? And we'll talk about that in some detail in a little bit. So for the moment, we'll just think about when we're exploiting, we're creating value from knowledge we already have, from ways of working that's already established. When we explore, we're experimenting. We're looking for different ways of doing things. We may be looking for better ways of doing things, new ways of doing things, but there's no probability of success. So exploit and explore are both very important, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail in a bit of time. Let's try and establish some common understanding of what we mean by innovative new ways of working. And maybe let me also step back and just state that regardless of what you first perceive about innovation or new ways of working, can I ask you to have an open mind about that and kind of keep following and thinking and reflecting as we have this discussion on the video today, because you can take a step back from innovation and we normally would have started off with change, and some people have a very strong perception that change is done to them and they don't have a chance to contribute or buy in, or it might just be an oppositional behaviour. They like the way they do things, they don't want to change, or they don't think that's for the greater good of the organisation. So change can have negative connotations. We then normally progress to transformation, where we do things in such a way that's significantly different from what was done before, that it transforms our way of working, it transforms our performance, it transforms the value we deliver. And equally, some people feel a bit tired of, why does everything have to be transformational? Or in fact, can it be transformational here, etc., etc. So I'm asking you to just think about that as ways of working. And if there are different ways of working to us or to you, or if they're new ways of working, that's what they are. They could be incremental gains, they could be completely disruptive in a completely different way of working. Both are valid, and we need both. But I'm asking you just to think about the ways of working as us finding better ways of doing things. But if we are going to do that, it actually needs to be done together. So it's not about change being done to us. It's not about everything having to be transformational. Some of it hopefully will be, and some of it will be incremental. So when we talk about ways of working as a general term for innovation, or even maybe to replace innovation if that's appropriate, then we're simply thinking about an intentional process that generates new creative ideas that we can implement and practically adopt. And as we do that, it should produce something which is more valuable than how we currently do it. So that qualitative change in a specific context, that context is you and me, the people in our work environment. And if we are going to do that to create new ways of working, it needs more than two people. And we won't always think the same, which is actually a good thing. So someone, normally the team leader, the project leader, would be constructively managing the differences amongst the people, identifying common problems, working towards some joint solutions, with an understanding that we don't completely agree. We never will completely agree. It is extremely unlikely we'll coexist in harmony. So there will be some disagreements, but we'll get to a point where we can live with that and we can take a step forward. And that constructive management of difference is actually very valuable, because if I reflect on it, I might then appreciate your point of view and think, well, why didn't we do it that way before? Sometimes we might just disagree and keep going, but there's enough commonality to give us the momentum to do that. And as we approach ways of working or new ways of working, it's really quite important to think about how we do that. It's not about ticking off checklists. It's not about saying, if you satisfy that, that, and that, we'll give it a go. And there's a perception that's how we sometimes can be. So we don't start by scoping out a new idea. That's not our approach to innovation. And we don't simply tick through that checklist. It's actually about us thinking deeply and as complexly as our ability will allow us, and working together and working independently in our normal jobs within the conditions that's been created. So within the work environment that we currently have, or the work environment we are trying to actually create. And if we can think about innovation like that, ways of working like that, it's actually, how can we do this in parallel with a normal job? And immediately I say that, some people start to think, well, I'm already too busy. Or some people say that would be good to do, but you know, I've got all these priorities. If we're going to be able to create new ways of working and solve some of the problems that we currently have, and make our lives a bit easier as we go forward, we need to take that approach of integrating objective, complex thinking, reflective, working together, maybe sometimes working autonomously, coming back together as we do our normal jobs, and then thinking, let's try that, or why don't we do it that way, or why haven't we done it that way? So that's what we're asking you and me and everyone to think about. If we then think about the people across the Scottish public sector, and the image simply shows you the headquarters of 32 local authorities, Scottish Government data communicates that there's 245,000 people employed across Scottish local government. And there's almost another 82,000 people working across Scottish public sector who are employed in the third sector or third sector organisations. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. We will have relationships in our teams, in our departments, in our own organisations, and hopefully we'll have wider relationships with other local authorities and other public sector organisations and other stakeholders. And it's about using those relationships to harness wider experience, to get access to different views, different expertise, different ways of doing things that we can think about. And if we're doing all of that and we're still not sure how to approach certain things, then we need to go and identify different relationships. We need to identify different knowledge and expertise that we can't get access to within our current networks and environment. And if we're going to do this sort of stuff, then co-action is a good way forward. And like I said earlier, that's actually the topic of a workshop on its own, so I'm only going to cover it very lightly. But by co-action, all we're actually meaning is we work together. We act and work together in a way where we might co-create some stuff, co-produce it and co-deliver it in ways which means I'm putting something in and you're putting something in. So it might take less resource from each organisation. We might share some budget, we might both invest some money, or it might simply be people hours, which obviously still costs money. But it's about that shared approach, that collaborative approach. And that could be our visions, because we could learn from each other even on the vision, or especially in the vision, about who we want to be and what our purpose is through the mission. We can share our strategies, we can share expertise, and we can share resources. So co-acting is a viable, effective way forward, and we might already do it already. We might do it quite intuitively, and that would be fabulous if we are. And if we're not, then we should think about it. Or we should think about wider co-action. Maybe there's resource, expertise, know-how and knowledge out with our established network that we would benefit from. And that might also support having new ways of working to us. Remember, it doesn't have to be completely disruptive, and equally it can be incremental, but it could be things that other people have done, but it's new to us and our way of working. We haven't done it that way before in our environment with our people. So that's really quite important. Everything can't be a complete invention. It can be an interpretation of some other stuff which is new to us. That means when we think about that, we should think about developing the people the best we can with the resources and expertise and know-how we've got, and we should do the same with organisation. We should think holistically and as widely as we can across the organisation of the way we work, the way we might wish to work, and how we can take that forward. We can learn from each other's strategies, we can learn from each other's roadmaps. There might be different knowledge and expertise in there we would benefit from for our way of working, but equally we might look at them, if they're visible to us, and say, well, we're doing that as well. Do we all need to have a programme in topic X? We could either agree who delivers what, could pool our resources, we could be more efficient. I could divert resource somewhere else because you're doing that, and you could do that for both organisations. Maybe there's a money transaction, maybe it's goodwill, maybe if you lead that one, we'll lead this one, but collaboratively we would actually be greater than some of our parts. Then we should think about place, so our work environment. And if we're thinking about innovation, then we shouldn't jump in with 2 feet and start trying to generate new ideas, because that's actually not the best approach, or it's proven not to be the best approach. Of course, we need to do that at some point. But if we start off with thinking about what is the environment that we need to create that will allow us to be able to produce alternative ways of working, new ways of working, experimental ideas that are worth trying out. So in our work environment, whether it's as we're working remotely at home today, or we're face-to-face in the office, or we're some blend of that, we're working completely online, what is our current work environment? And what is the optimum way of working that we can create that gives us a chance to generate different ideas and then to actually explore those ideas? And if you look at that image, the online provision, I think everyone now believes it's going to play a bigger part in our new norm as we come out of the pandemic. Okay, we don't know exactly what that's going to be yet, or many of us don't. Or we might think we know, but it's probably going to evolve, isn't it? We've got a number of people working on that. We've now got MS Teams as a platform. We've got Big Blue Button software. We've got Zoom and many, many others. The digital office will be doing work to give us the most optimal system that we can afford and has got the functionality we need. And that will keep evolving. How do we sustain a level of interaction which is as close to face-to-face as the platforms we use will allow? And are there other ways of working which are now more fit for purpose? And that goes beyond 3 days at home and 2 days in the office. You know, some people might be much more productive working autonomously. Other people need that physical face-to-face interaction to have that kind of element of well-being and be productive. It's what's right for the people within the scope of the organisation, within the environment it can support. So looking to the future to what that new norm is, can we facilitate a way of working that's best for us as a team or an organisation, or as a regional community, as a national community? What does good look like? What's optimum? So we should think about the environment to support some of that creative working, which allows us to implement stuff that's worth trying out. So it's worth thinking about exploit and explore specifically, and we obviously touched on that in an early slide. If we start with exploit, that's about business as usual. That's about us applying what we already know through standard procedures, policies and processes. And if we apply it in that way, like we've done probably hundreds or thousands of times before, it's about routine performance, it's about operational objectives. And if we do it in that way, we'll get a quick return. It might be immediate, but it'll be short term. And it's not risky because we've done it hundreds, if not thousands of times before. Now, most of us spend most of our day exploiting things in that way. Exploiting is a good thing in this environment, in this context. It's constructive. We're creating value. We're solving problems. We're delivering a valuable service for the community. That's the exploitation. Different from that is exploration, which is experimental. It's about trying things out. It's not business as usual, and it's adaptive performance, but it's for the long run. Whether that's a week, 6 months, or a year or longer, we will not get an immediate return. We will not get a quick return, and it might not work at all. We might not get any return. And we have to take that into consideration. So it's certainly higher risk than exploitation, and it may actually be high risk. But if we're going to solve some of the problems we have, if we're going to be able to solve things that we're not solving in the way we're currently working, then we need new ways of working. And it's exploration that allows us to pursue new ways of working and to pursue emerging opportunities. Now, everyone has got the capability of exploiting and exploring, but not everyone wants to do both. When you're exploiting, you're generating value, and there's a personal performance there, and there's also extended then organisational performance. When you're exploring, your routine performance is lower because some of your time is spent trying things out, and you can't be exploring and exploiting at the same time. It's not possible. So depending on our behaviours, our personality traits, our motivations, that can be a good or bad thing. So that's something from a leadership perspective we have to think about. How do we facilitate and encourage and motivate people to work in the appropriate way at the right time for our organisation? But we should be really clear that both are crucial. We just can't do both at the same time, and not everybody wishes to do both. That doesn't mean to say they don't have the capability to do it, and they might be the best person to explore, but they don't want to because it might impact their performance and their perception of their performance. Another part about that, and it's often talked about in the public sector, is our appetite to risk. When we're exploring, we need a different approach and attitude to risk. It's not about the standard risk register approach, which has its place and has its value, where we look at the probability of something happening and we say it's X, and we look at the impact of that if it happens, and we multiply the two together to get a risk value, and then we look at mitigation, and we look at contingencies. Now that has its value and that has its place, but that's not it doesn't fit well with exploration because that's going to stop us doing things. So for exploration, we need to be able to live with the uncertainty. We need to be able to tolerate that risk, and this might not work. If it doesn't work, we'll take stock of where we are, bit of a post-mortem, and we'll figure out, well, it was 10% successful, how can we go forward from here? Well, it's 50% successful. If we did this and this, we think we can get to 100% or 80% or whatever it is, and that's another iteration. If we have support to do that, and we'll come back to that support and promotion in a bit, but that's equally important because is there appetite to give more time, more money, more hours to go and continue to work in this? Maybe there's a perception that it's not been successful and we should stop it. And that might be the right decision, or it might be the wrong decision. So this is complex, and it needs, it needs some persuasion, some influence, and it needs good communication back and forth in a transparent and objective way about where we've got to, where we would like to go next and why. If we come back to the people and think about innovative work behaviour and what we actually mean by that, because I find that a bit of a mouthful, but it's the intentional creation, introduction, or application of new ideas within our work, whether that's your specific job role, or your group or team, or the whole organisation. It's all of that, depends on the context of it. But as we intentionally create that stuff, introduce it and apply it, we're doing that to create some value, to deliver some benefit to an individual role, to performance, to the group, the team, or the organisation. So when we talk about innovative work behaviour, that's all we're meaning. It's an intentional approach to actually applying new ideas to create some of value. That's all we mean. But it's more than that, because in order to apply those new ideas, somebody has to think them up. So the image in the bottom right, it's that creative process of coming up with a new idea. And it is definitely is that. That's the first stage of it, but it's more than that, because someone needs to promote the idea. Someone needs to promote the idea to get a decision maker to support it and authorise time and money to go and try it out, to go and explore and experiment. And then a group of people need to actually have the motivation and the ability to go and actually implement it, to go and tangibly implement it in a practical way, so we can figure out, is this better or worse than what we're currently doing? And that promotion that we'll come to in a bit more detail a bit later also needs to be considered at senior decision maker level. So thinking about that, there are 4 components that are recommended we should think about, and it starts with generating that useful novel idea, although we said earlier it doesn't actually start with that. Innovative work behaviour starts with that, but the environment comes before that. We've created an environment where people are motivated to give things a go, and they'll not be kicked up the backside if it doesn't work, and so on. So it actually starts with environment and us thinking in those complex ways in our normal ways of working in our normal jobs. But the behaviour starts with that generation of useful ideas, those novel ideas, and then we go looking for sponsorship. The sponsorships in multiple levels. It could be with you and I and trying to form a team with diverse views we can debate that and challenge each other and support each other, that we could have something worth trying to go and explore and experiment with. It is that. It's also about sponsorship at a more senior level, where someone on the senior management team or the executive team, someone with decision-making authority amongst their peers, can sponsor the idea, can influence others, intellectually stimulate them that this is worth trying, here is the potential value from this, and maybe justifying it to get wider support, and maybe defending it if it's not going quite as we thought, and maybe defending it in terms of, we're part successful, but we now want to go for another iteration, so we need more money and more time. So that, multi-level sponsorship is quite important. It's then obviously about going and doing it, going and implementing the idea and continually promoting the idea in a transparent way. It's like snapshots, it's status reports. Here's what we said we would do, here's what we've done, here's what we've found out, or these are the results, so this is what we now understand, and here's where we intend to go next, within the condition of we need more time and continued support, maybe more people or hours or more money. And last but not least, a different researcher then says, yeah, but we have to recognise that these are opportunities, or we have to recognise that these are problems. And that's open to interpretation. You might think what you've just promoted and asked for support for is opportunity number 1. Another 10 people might think they've got different views on that. They've interpreted different things as the biggest opportunity or the biggest problem. So there needs to be a recognition that this is a genuine opportunity or problem we should solve. And that recognition is definitely open to interpretation, and people bringing to bear what they already know and what they believe from that and what that would mean. And that might come back to bullet 2 there, where that sponsor needs to be continually promoting that as well. Okay. The kind of analogy I asked you to think about in terms of change or transformation or ways of working, I'm actually going to bring back to learning now, and specifically organisational learning. Now, whatever you think about learning, I'm asking you to keep an open mind for the moment, because this can be what's fit for purpose for you, using the model called absorptive capacity. So what it actually means is it says that we're facing an opportunity or a problem, and either we've exhausted everything we know or we don't know how to approach it. So how do we acquire information from external sources that would be useful to us so that we can actually pursue this opportunity or solve the problem? Now, we have to have some awareness that we've all got existing knowledge. We've all got prior knowledge that we're going to bring to bear in this. So I might look at new information and don't think that's really fit for purpose for us. You might look at the same information with a different view. So there needs to be that interaction between us as a team, as a group of people, to have that debate. Normally, when we think about acquiring knowledge, it's from external sources. And that's normally within the proviso of, well, we should really know the team that we've got, and we should know what people know and what they're good at and their past experience and so on. Now, we don't always know that, so it could come from internal sources, but normally it's thought about coming from external sources. So how do we acquire access to information from external sources that's new to us? And then once we've done that, how do we analyse it, interpret it, and think about that acquired information in our work context with what we already know, and we interpret that and adapt it and modify it and tweak it to something we think is fit for purpose for us. So we might exclude some things because maybe we don't like that way of working, or we've never got that type of technique to work, or we don't value that as a team, or the decision maker won't value that. So we're tweaking and adapting and optimizing it into a different form, which we think is fit for purpose for us. And then as we're doing that, we're bringing that to bear with that new knowledge, that assimilated, synthesized, interpreted knowledge, with the knowledge we already have. And we're starting to combine that. And we're bringing our internal organisation into that, our current way of working. And we should be careful there, because that might be supportive or counterproductive. So we've got to actually kind of debate that and go through that process. But the main point is we're taking the new stuff we've acquired with what we already know, and we're transforming that into something which, in a combined way, creates knowledge which is different from the other two things. And it's that combined, transformed knowledge that we would go and exploit. Now, the acquisition, assimilation, transformation is actually that explorative cycle. And we could go through that once or 100 times until we get something that we think is fit for purpose, that we would be comfortable, willing, or motivated to go and actually implement. But when we get to that point, now we go and exploit it. And exploit it is constructive here. It's a good thing. We apply that for some benefit, commercial gain, value add, save some money, be more productive, be more efficient, whatever's fit for purpose for us. So as we face the problems we face, or the opportunities we can see, the consequences of the pandemic, we would need to work in different ways, because we need to solve things that we currently can't solve or are not solving. And as we do that, we need to learn new stuff, or new to us, and actually adapt it to a way that's fit for purpose for us, and then go and implement it and exploit it, and then step back and measure it. Is it good or bad? Is it better or worse? And that probably needs more iterations to go through that again. And this should become part of our way of working. This should be embedded in our practice, switching between exploiting and switching between exploration. And then we should think a bit more about the organisational learning. Now, all of that is organisational learning, but we should think about it a bit more, because once we've acquired something which is more useful than what we had before, how do we distribute that? If it's useful to us, it can be useful to all other people in the organisation, or some of them, and our external partners across our network. So how do we distribute it? And as we do that, we need to think about how we communicate it. Are we communicate it in an inspirational way which captures people's attention and gets them to think about it and reflect on it? Are we intellectually stimulating people where they think, well, I don't know about that, but it's worth thinking about. I don't agree with that, but the way that was communicated, I should have a look at it. It's that type of approach. And then once we've got something which works, it would normally be embedded as our business as usual, our normal way of working, our new way of working, until there's a better way of doing it. But as it's embedded like that, how do we remember that? So that fantastic work that you just did, but you leave, you join a different organisation, but you go into bigger and better things. How does the organisation remember this in your absence, so we can continue to apply it, exploit it, explore it, go through other iterations? So we should think about that. And that could be vested in the people and or in the processes. That could be in something like the academy where we share practice. It could be in the knowledge hub. It could be in different platforms. Is it a learner management system? Is it a knowledge management system? But it's more about the people and the environment than it is the system. So we should take that into some context and think about how we use that in our new way of working, which has become our normal way of working, until there's a better way of doing stuff, or until the external environment changes, where what we're doing is no longer fit for purpose because it's not solving the problems, or it's not cost effective sufficiently, or it's not productive enough, or whatever else comes to bear. So this is a practice that we really should learn and embed, and it should be our norm. Okay, this graphic is just showing you part of the front page of the Academy, and I've given the URL at the top. There's a lot of information in the public domain in the Academy which you've got free access to. So it would be nice to use that. If you've got stuff you would like to share and get the credit for your work, in the bottom right there, the part in orange, we've got a bit for sharing practice. So we'd be more than happy to share your practice and give you the credit for it. So it's another source of information which we believe is valuable. Leave my contact details. If there's anything you don't agree with, do agree with, and you want to chat, discuss, or explore together, I would be delighted to have that conversation. And then any literature that I've used, I'm referencing. So if you wanted to double check anything, or you wanted to know where it came from, then it's all there. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I hope to speak to you in the future.